Lose yourself in a good book. The Board Gosh Energy Book Club.
From the surreal to the academic almost.
This month's book club choice is Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, which celebrates its 200th anniversary this year. Published in July 1814, Mansfield Park is the story of Fanny Price, who has been raised by her wealthy aunt and uncle as an act of charity to her mother, who married poorly.
Treated as inferior by everyone except her cousin Edmund, Fanny's gratitude towards Edmund secretly grows into love. As suitors and other lovers come into the picture, the plot thickens and emotions run high in true Austen style. Lecturer Mary Breen from the University College Cork joins us this morning to discuss this beautiful story. Mary, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Mary, I was just saying to you there on the break, I read this when I think when I was about 13 or 14. I knew nothing of love or life, so I probably missed an awful lot of the book because it's quite a complicated book.
It is, I suppose, like many critics believe, it's the first great English novel. This is. Austen had already published Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility, so she was a published author and had begun to be known at this time. So she does something much more ambitious in Mansfield Park. Also, the earlier novels were novels when she was a young woman, hoping that she would have a romantic future herself. By the time she comes to write Mansfield Park, she's 38. She's mature. Her life has changed. She's living with her mother, who's widowed, and her unmarried sister. They're in Chawton Cottage. They're living on the charity of her brother, who's quite wealthy, and a local landlord. And life is very different. She's more meditative, more thoughtful, and the novel reflects that. So although we get a great deal of social comedy in the novel, and we get the Jane Austen style in the novel, we also get the thoughts of a much more mature writer. And the techniques of the novel are so developed and they're subtle, difficult to understand. And she develops something that we now credit Joyce with, like the Joyce's interior monologue, yes, indeed, and stream of consciousness. Yes. Austen develops what's called free narrative style, and what she does there is that our heroine Fanny Price that you've described is kind of a Cinderella character, and for many people the least favourite Jane Austen.
She's considered to be the most boring, but is she also maybe the closest to Austen herself?
She's incredibly interesting character, and this free narrative style that Austen uses gives us access to Fanny. So we see her thoughts, we see her pattern of thinking, we see what's going on inside her head, but it's hidden from the other characters in the novel. Very often they misunderstand her, they don't know what she's doing, they don't know what she's thinking, because she actually doesn't tell them. But if the reader is careful and you watch and you really read carefully, you can see what she's thinking.
Well, why is she the least favourite of Austen's heroines?
Because we had, before her, we had of course Elizabeth Bennet, who's the favourite of all time, and we have then Marianne and Eleanor Dashwood, who are also lively, interesting, chatty, outspoken,
women.
Strong.
Yeah.
And Fanny is much quieter. She's shy.
Much more contemplative, much more thoughtful.
Exactly.
Doesn't
she blushes all the time.
Impulsive.
Yeah,
thinks everything through. Very rarely makes a wrong decision.
Never makes a wrong decision.
Sounds like Austen herself.
The mature Austen, or what Austen thinks maybe you should be at this age, more like Anne Elliot, that end of the spectrum, rather than Elizabeth Bennet. And she's the only character in all of the Austen novels where Austen comes out as the writer herself at the end of the novel and says, "My Fanny."
Yeah.
Like, I've made her happy at the end of all, because she goes through terrible times.
She has, I was about to say, she's the most unfortunate character.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible things befall her.
Yeah, and she also, we see, she's jealous, she's unhappy, she's misunderstood, she's put upon in so many different ways, and yet she stays staunch throughout it. And she's the moral heart of the story. She's the one who thinks correctly on all things. And she gets some of the most wonderful Austen lines, things like, "We have in ourselves the best judge if we'd only listen to ourselves." She says things like that. Austen says of her that her own thoughts and reflections are always her best companions. So this sense of being in yourself complete unto yourself. So she's a better example of the accomplished woman than, say, Elizabeth Bennet in a way, because we get to see her inner thoughts, and we see the trials and tribulations that she goes through are much, much more difficult than what happens
and
to
for people
Elizabeth
at home who maybe have never read Austen at all, they're thinking, this book was written 200 years ago. How could it possibly have any relevance to me in my life? How could I even begin to engage with it?
It's the human condition. Like, that's what she's talking about. She's talking about how families don't get on and do get on, how they fall apart. She attacks all kinds of things like sisterly affection, which has been one of the really strong hallmarks of the earlier novels, with the Bennet sisters and the Dashwood sisters. Now we have the Bertram sisters, and their friends, until a man comes into the equation, right? And then they're so
She also has always had a very acute eye for the ultimate social contract, which is marriage.
Oh yeah, that's what it's about. For, like, Austen herself knows at this stage, she is dependent on her brother. She's no other option. She starts to make money from her fiction, that's true, but not enough to be independent. So there's no place for her or for other women. The one thing they have to do is get married. That's what life's about. If you don't get married...
And get married well.
Indeed, and like as Mary Crawford, one of the characters in the novel, says, marriage is a manoeuvring business, okay? So you've got to marry well, you've got to marry money, but Austen also shows us how marrying for money is disastrous.
And how Austen ultimately herself chose not to do that.
Say, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Mary, thank you very much
indeed. Things have changed a lot since Austen wrote that 200 years ago.
Not as much as we'd like. Anyway,
Mary,
thank you very much indeed. Now, to mark the bicentenary of its publication, the book club choice for May is Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. If you would like to be in with the chance of winning a book club goodie bag and a Versus tablet, then send us your reviews of no more than 50 words, and you have to have them in by Friday, May 30th.
Mansfield Park in 50 words. Austen will be proud. You can email your reviews to IrelandAM at tv3.ie or post them to Bord Gáis Energy Book Club, TV3 Westgate Business Park, Ballymount, Dublin 24.
Lose yourself in a good book. The Bord Gáis Energy Book Club.